joining us. Thank you so much for your flexibility with our date change. Um, Someone speculated, Nouria, that it had probably started raining, and that's why you wanted to change the date from yesterday.
Ooh, unfortunately, I'm not quite there yet.
Yeah.
Haven't spent too much time in the boat, just easing into things. But we snuck into Italy, which is forbidden right now,
Uh-oh.
technically for French citizens. But we just told the truth to the custom officer, and she's like, "Oh yeah, you're working. Go ahead." To pick up the new boats at the factory before it's all locked down, because right now most of Italy is getting in red zone, and France has some weird announcements about curfew and
Mm.
restrictions, and I just wanted to have the boats before things go all wrong again, because we're pretty much at the same stage as last year with
Yeah.
weird decision making for sure.
What what boats are they? What brand or what?
The Waka just designed two boats. One is more like a river running slicey boat that's bigger than a lot of the slicey boats that came out. Um, and the other one is like a race boat. But I feel like they're gonna be really good for my size. And selfishly, maybe they're not gonna be as good for a heavier boater, but
That's funny.
I have a good feeling. I need to try them, but they look good.
Perfect. We have I can't tell you, of course we've got all the Facebook groups for paddlers and whatnot, and the post that you see all the time is anyone going through the gorge? Can they pick up a waka and bring it to me? I'm in Colorado. They have to, I forget there's one kayaker in the White Salmon area.
Oh, I think Evan is
Is
selling
Evan.
boats. Yeah.
Yep, that's right.
Um,
So he's got lots of people always stopping by.
trying
All
to
right,
reach
we still have a
out.
few people joining. I'm going to let the last person or two in. I'll keep an eye on folks trying to get in, but we should go ahead and get started just to respect everyone's time. And I have a few little housekeeping things. If I can figure out where they went. Stand by. There we go.
Oh wow, you are organized.
Look at me.
Now I really need to learn how to do that.
I have to learn how to get it to go. Where's my home? Home view.
I'm sure someone out of the 47 person knows where it is, but
They're
it's not me.
they're watching me do this and they're like, Deborah,
Bottom right corner.
do what,
The
Jerry?
bottom right corner.
Bottom right corner. Where?
Oh, you got it hidden behind your menu bar. There you go.
And now where?
Just there. Slideshow.
What would I do without you?
Oh,
Jerry
nailed it.
Malloy. Thank God. Jerry Malloy, I was saying just 2 days ago, you got perfect attendance, and I am so appreciative of that because I needed you to.
Now you have a reason, yeah.
All right. So, hello, everyone. I'm Deborah Kane. I am the president of the Lower Columbia Canoe Club. It's my great honor to welcome you today to one of our takeout talks. I think this is our second takeout talk, but I also think this is probably our most popular takeout talk. So, today, in just 2 seconds, we're going to hear from Nouria Newman. I asked her to talk to us about the concept of fear as a social construct because that was something that she looked at in her master's thesis. But I'm also hoping we'll get into a little bit of a discussion about gender dynamics in paddle sports because that's also something that the Lower Columbia Canoe Club is focusing on this year. So for those that just joined the Lower Columbia Canoe Club, I think we probably had a little run on members in the last 2 or 3 days, probably 50 or so new folks joining so that you could get the link to the talk with Nouria. But up next, we've got Rafa Ortiz. After Rafa, we're going to do actually another 5-part series on diversity, equity, and inclusion to see if we can't take some steps together as a club to be more welcoming to folks that want to get into paddle sports. And finally, we're going to end our takeout talks with a conversation about yoga and paddling. So check the website for dates on those. And then also just a reminder, we are literally right now in the middle of a 5-part series on safety, which has been organized by Teresa Greider, our safety chair. We've got 2 more episodes in the safety series coming up. And the last 2 safety series talks were recorded, and the recording is posted online. So if you missed it, you can go back and watch it. And then finally, I just wanted to make sure that everyone is aware that in addition to the online content that we're doing now because of COVID, we are also offering in-person classes. And so we've got a swiftwater rescue course coming up over 2 different weekends, May 1st and May 2nd, or May 8, May 9. And if you try to register for one of those swiftwater rescue courses and they are full, please send us an email at lowercolumbiacanoeclub@gmail.com so that we know that there's more interest and we could take a look at possibly adding a 3rd weekend for swiftwater rescue. And then finally, I think it's like that last weekend in May, we've got 2 different one-day sessions focused on kayaking skill development specifically for women boaters only, with the California Whitewater Collective. And I'm guessing after Nouria's talk today, if those 2 classes aren't full, they will be in a day or 2.
Ooh.
So cool. Best club ever.
Maybe not. I'm just gonna leave this out there. All right.
Let's so with that, Nouria, we are so excited that you are with us. You you are a hero, honestly, to so many folks.
I am not.
Okay. Let me introduce you, and then you can make
All
it clear that you're not a hero.
Very normal person.
We are
I
so
forget my key, I crash, I do all of the things like everyone else.
we are so thrilled to welcome the most normal, professional, world's best kayaker to our takeout talk today. It sounds like, honestly, you don't want me to read off the list of all of your accomplishments, but you have many, so I'll leave it at that. Maybe I don't want to embarrass you. Out of all the things, though, that I was going to say about you, the one that I still want to say, I want to draw people's attention to the quote from Ben Stokesbury that was in that 2020 Outside magazine did a feature on you, and there was a line in that feature where Ben Stokesbury said, "For the first time ever, the world's best kayaker is a woman." And women kayakers all across the world read that sentence. I just want you to know. And our pride swelled like you cannot believe. So I want to thank you for being an inspiration for so many female boaters the world over. And I want to just congratulate you on your many, many accomplishments, which I won't list because I don't want to embarrass you. But you have logged so many firsts. First this, first that, first the other. And you are just back, are you not, from Ecuador?
Yeah.
Where, good Lord, look at you. You were the first person to run this waterfall and the first female to hurl herself over a 100+ foot waterfall. So huge congratulations on that. And I thought, Nouria, I'll stop sharing my screen and I'm just going to turn it over to you. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you as we get started is just maybe tell us a little bit about your trip to Ecuador and what did that feel like? That most recent accomplishment.
So the trip to Ecuador is, first it was with Ben. So that's why it's maybe not the most objective saying that, is because he's my friend. And friends are not always objective, but I just love him even more for that. And we had this expedition planned. We were maybe gonna go in December and then January and then COVID and then it was canceled. It's still very much uh, in the schedule for this year, but we're looking at August, maybe September. It's all unsure, and I wanted to travel because opportunities. Ecuador was open, and then Ben was keen to go there, even if it was a little bit late. And we thought Ecuador would be perfect because if we show up for that bigger expedition, it would be nice to have a feel for the place and, you know people there, understand how things work with local people, with the jungle, with the forecast. So we went there knowing it was a little bit late, and then of course, what we knew was gonna happen happened. Although we were hoping that maybe we'll get on some really nice first descents, we had very limited window forecast. So the few first descents, the first one we actually tried, we had to hike out after 500 meters, um, and climb out, and it was a little bit scary because it started raining and the river came up fairly fast in a boxed in canyon, just being the two of us. And we came to the conclusion that two is not a good number. Obvious, we knew that before. That we also needed some drill and some bolts for the rivers that we're looking at in Ecuador. And most importantly of all, we need Airy Boomer to be there as a third, and preferably a fourth would be really nice. So definitely some good learning experience, but frustrating at the same time to not get any bigger descents. Um, because of the window forecast, and then we also got in trouble with permits and river access with some French landowners. So it was kind of funny because I'm French, and then all the local people hated this French guy, the farmers, the park rangers, everyone hated him. Apparently, is just not being nice to anybody down there. So we just started joking about French people, and they knew I was French, and became friends with the locals, the park rangers. So now we have a way through the park ranger to access this river if we were gonna go back. So um, we should really go back and do it. And as we started looking for those first descents, we also scouted this waterfall that is on the Pucuna River, which is just downstream of where we hiked out. I mean, if maybe 8 kilometers downstream from where we had to hike out. And Abe area, which is a booth session. I don't know if some of you guys have been to Ecuador. Is the one that showed me the images of it, and I know Trent and Jeremy Nash and Galen had been looking at it, but it's really hard to catch the proper water levels. And so I organized that this was going to be my 100-foot project, because initially that has been a project for the last 3 years. So I've been preparing for it specifically and trying to run higher waterfalls and make sure that I was ready to physically take some impacts. And my plan was to run Ram Falls in Canada, uh, which is substantially nicer in terms of the logistics to just go there, and there is a road and the lip is nice. But with COVID and Canada still being really hard to access for French people, I was like, okay, maybe I should just look at this. And then I thought it was maybe cooler to have a waterfall that hasn't been run before, and the lip is tricky. And what also one of the reason it hasn't been run is it's requiring a lot of rope work
Mm.
to even scout it and to go down and to run it and to set up safety. And so I think that when some of the guys came down there, they never really looked at it from both the pool and the top, and then they never stayed long enough to get the good water levels. So overall, we did 3 scouting trips, one of which had the perfect water level, and then when I went back for the final project, it was definitely a bit low, but uh, I couldn't wait anymore, so I definitely went low side of good, and the hit was hard, but okay.
Oh dear.
Couldn't talk right after. It was just like, oh no, I can breathe, but I can't talk because of the cinetic. It just feels like all your insides just come up onto your thorax. So it's not the nicest feeling in the world, but eventually it all comes back together, and it's okay. But I don't think that people that tell you they ran 100 footer and they're like, no, it was super soft, are totally being honest. But it tends to be a thing these days.
Oh my gosh, Nori, I love it. Do you you've answered actually so many questions that I had for you, but one of them is, just on this notion of being the first to do so many things, and the first female to do so many things. Do you do you ever feel like it's a burden being the first woman to achieve some of these feats?
um, well, I I think there are some firsts that it doesn't matter. Like you can be the first to run, the shittiest little drop next to your home, and it means nothing, and then you can be the second on a really remote river, and maybe you didn't have the information, and you went in there like if you were the first, but someone's been in there before you, and then that would still mean more. So I wouldn't be too attached to being, the first, or it definitely helps, like I'm not gonna lie, you have a sponsorship proposal or you have your end of the year review, it's business. You put first this, champion that, it works super well. uh Numbers, facts, uh it talks to a general audience, but since everyone here is paddling, I think, like, what does it mean to be the first female to do something if there is already like 200 guys that have done it? I don't think. Maybe you have the waterfall world record, and for female for years it was Mitlaco, and Mitlaco is really tall, but it's just the easiest big waterfall in the world where you have this perfect rolling lip. You do absolutely nothing, and the less you do, the more likely it's gonna go well. And in opposition to that, you have Shannon Carroll, who runs Sahali, and it was the first descent that it was the highest waterfall at the time, but it was also a descent that hasn't been repeated for 10 years before the second descent, because it was such a legit first descent that none of the boys went after her. And then I don't know if anyone, or I don't think there is more than one or two guys that have actually run the entrance rapid, which she did.
Hmm.
And so that's something that to me is I'm like, okay, this is a first. um and that's, it's hard because sometimes you feel proud of something and it's not talking to people, and maybe it's because Shannon was not really selling it or trying anything, or maybe it's too technical to really speak to a general audience, where you're like 100 feet
Mm,
works,
yeah.
and then you have all these really stupid things, it's like, welcome to the 3 digits club, and you're like, this is so dumb.
Yeah.
Like, does it really matter whether it's 100 or 90? Because I know there are 90 feet waterfalls that are, or 60 feet waterfalls way harder than 100 feet waterfalls. And I think a lot of the time the mistake is to get stuck on numbers or on a list. And I see, you talk to some young boys, or not so young guys, and they're like, oh yeah, 100 footer is so much different than a 90 or 80 footer. You'll feel it, it's so much longer. And then I was like, wow, actually, maybe I don't want to do, maybe I'm not ready for this, maybe it's too much. And I felt like I was very lucky to have a few honest people. And I've definitely been talking to Galen, because he's honest and he's a really good friend, and I really like Galen. um and he was like, you won't feel the difference between 90 or 100.
Yeah.
And then talking to Tyler Bratt, and he's like, I always kept my paddle. And so it was nice to get, like, a few of the guys just being super factual and super honest about it, whereas like some other people have talked to, it was a little bit messed up. But I feel like sometimes, and it happens to everyone, when you do something that's hard and people ask you about it, or you're telling the story, you tend to be like, oh yeah, it was so big, or and with I've probably done that, especially being younger, when I was like still very much impressed with the rapids, or the reputation or the stories behind it. And then you kind of like make it up a little bit. So that's something that's hard, because
Well,
it's like, oh yeah, it's a first, but it doesn't really matter in the end.
well, Nouria, I'm going to read you a quote that you said once that I think might be relevant to this conversation. You said, quote, I wish girls had more ego to stand up and show the world how good they actually are. Kayaking is a reflection of society.
Yeah.
Do you remember what you meant by that?
um I feel like a lot of the very best women that paddle are so humble that they are invisible.
Hmm.
And the one I look up to are like Nicole Mansfield, Anna Wagner, Rachel Lowell Smith, Sandra Hislop, uh, Marike from Austria. And it's probably a lot of these girls that you don't know who they are. And then a lot of the girls that you know about, and I've definitely went through this, as a young girl from France. You see all these big American names, and you're like, whoa, that must be so good. And I'm 12 years old, and there is this race in Lyon, and then all the Americans show up. And then, I saw them in the magazines, and I'm like, whoa, I'm so impressed. Um, and then they sucked. Like they couldn't, no, but they couldn't even catch the wave. And they were the ladies from the magazines. And then I was like, I don't understand, because at the time I was paddling with this humble British paddler, Deb Pinniger. Um, and she was way better, but she was not, one of the main stars. And I feel like this is very much true to this, that some of the very best female paddler, the ones that I feel paddle hard, they're just, a lot of them are super low-key. Like, best Californian kayaker is Tracy Tate. Well, now she's Tracy Young, but she's not like in the spotlight. You'll never see her in the magazine. And then I don't know, but it's,
Do you think it's about?
maybe it's changing with the younger generation, because, and I hope it is, because they're the only ones that can really change things. I think for my generation, it's already almost too late. You know, we have like integrated some of the representations. I mean, generally, not like, of course you have individuals that get out from this, but um I think the younger generation, they might do better. I feel like they might do better unless they start, posting bikini shots because it works, and being super cheesy and wearing pink. But at this point, I can tell them, hey, this is a little bit lame, but I'm not their parents, so. And I will try a couple times, but if it's not working, I'm not gonna lose my time. And I think I think some of the young girls that they were world class, um this in Ecuador, I've seen them paddle, and I was like, okay, yeah, this is really good. And it was the first time that I actually had, like a strong feeling that it was gonna go well, because they were 4 or 5, and they were just as solid as the guys, and it was really really cool to watch their attitude in the boat and outside of the boat. And I don't think I had seen that before.
I'm going to ask you one more question just on gender dynamics, and then I want to segue into talking more about fear in your master's thesis. But, you know, in the context of these ladies who, in some respect, you say are maybe, not the ones who are wearing pink in their bikinis, but, super strong paddlers, and maybe humble, I think is the word that you used. Do you think that there's a disconnect between their sense of themselves and their abilities? Like, do you think that they don't think they're deserving of the spotlight and the rest of it, or do
um
you really think they just don't need it?
I some of them, I know they don't care.
Mhm.
They want to do their own thing, and they don't need the exposure. And like, I mean, you get so little out of kayaking companies that sometimes it's just worth um buying your own gear and having peace, and not having to post, and not having to do any of that.
Yeah.
uh but I also feel like, and I'm going for the same thing with my friend who's a skier, is that they're like, I don't want to deal with this. I will work and I will pay for all of my stuff. um and then she's one of the best steep skier in France.
Right.
um and she went on this expedition, I think that was in 2014. She is still paying a credit for it. And now, because she's good and the basic work, she doesn't pay for skis anymore. They get fundings for expeditions, and it doesn't take that much to get the support, and it's also enabling them to do more.
Mhm.
um and so there is a balance where it's worth it. But I definitely understand both positions, and it's very personal.
Yeah.
But I think, generally speaking, some of the best female paddler I know are sometimes too humble for their own good, and they don't tend to negotiate contract properly. I've seen a team manager kick out Nicole Mansfield, and then I had to take an order for that same company, and I was like, just copied the boss of the company, and I'm like, by the way, I'm with Nicole, and she also needs this, 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 and that. And it was not even a question.
Right.
She would get the gear,
Right.
but
Because you were the one saying,
that someone randomly decided, oh, you're not doing enough. But she was definitely more than enough. And I feel like sometimes it's this lack of obvious confidence that, you know, maybe we don't have the same contract because we suck at negotiating contracts. And it's been a very eye-opening thing for me to start knowing what some of the guys were getting versus what I'm getting. And you know, when still today the same company is paying one of their guys 5 times more than me, I'm like, okay, they've been there for longer, but I'm still questioning, you know, the logic behind this. And of course, I don't think being a woman explains or can is the only factor behind this. But actually, the more rude and the less nice I am in email with some of the companies, the better it works for me, which has been really hard uh, with some of the companies I worked with, because I'm like, oh, I should have been an asshole 3 years ago. And maybe I could have afforded to buy a car that works and not half of a secondhand car with a friend that barely works, and then we became best friend with the mechanic because we go so often. um
yeah.
but at
Well,
the same time, same thing, you know, with some of the companies I work with, being nice, and the trust relationship we have is what makes it work. And I've had a few times where I was like, well, that's what they do, and I would go for less, you know, because maybe you're smaller companies, and companies been like, no, you deserve more, and they proposed me better contract. uh and that just depends. So I don't have,
yeah.
I unfortunately I studied sociology and not a business degree, so I'm probably doing things wrong or not as good as some of the boys.
Yeah.
um,
To
and
that,
I don't think gender explains everything.
right, right, right. Well, and to that, I would say, you know, from our vantage point, it definitely looks like you're doing way more right than you are wrong. But it is interesting, you know, for those of us who are just recreationally paddling on the weekend, you know, most of us could rattle off the names of 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 um, male kayakers who are kayaking at your level, and really only one female kayaker who we happen to have the honor of speaking with today. And it has impacts, right? Because you know, at the local level, in our local kayaking community, we at this point, you know, after this year and a real focus on encouraging female boaters to join, we probably have way more female boaters than we do male boaters in the Lower Columbia Canoe Club. And so we're determined in everything we do to make sure that the women boaters are represented, you know, as the speakers, as the teachers, as the folks that are mentoring others who come up into the sport. So I appreciate your thinking through that a little bit. At your level, it's a totally different deal, but keep fighting for all those other ladies, because as much as we love celebrating you and all of your firsts, how great would it be if there were 6 others that were household names? So I want to segue a little bit to your master's thesis. Can you describe in general terms, because that's the area of our talk I think where we'll get into the notion of fear and what you found out about fear or what you discovered.
Yeah. So I studied political science, and then you have a research thesis. And my initial plan was to study the relationship towards risks and fear in extreme sport for women. Unfortunately, things happen in my personal life that I decided to narrow the subject to whitewater kayaking because I only had a few months to do it instead of the 2 years allocated for it, because I was very disorganized, and that was why I was never top of the class, but just made it. And so I did pretty much an ethnography with female paddler. So I had 25 long open interviews trying to figure out like background and social upbringing, um, primary, secondary socialization, and then with Bourdieu's field theory, uh, the the place occupied by the women in whitewater kayaking, if you start considering whitewater kayaking as a sociological study field. So it was that would be a little bit tricky to just explain like this, because you need a lot of like very boring and fascinating theories about gender regimes and field theory and habitus and primary secondary socialization and basically domination mechanism. And I'm sure someone who studied sociology in the US would maybe disagree with some of the theoretical frames I used, because they're French for some of them. And I think as Americans, maybe you would almost uh, see them as too socialist, almost neo-Marxist. Uh, so we'll not get into this, but basically, I decided to study this because I heard, yeah, women are way more scared than men in whitewater kayaking. And then I heard people saying this, and I was like, is this true? This is not true, because I didn't want it to be true. And then when I look at women on rivers compared to men, they're way more scared. And you have more women crying in the eddies, paralyzed with fear, less women just like sending a rapid and swimming and going back up and doing it again. Or at least at the time. I'm hoping that the young girls are doing that by now.
Yeah.
But it's been winter, so I haven't paddled with the little girls from the kayak club this year, but I'm hoping to do it. Um, and so I was like, oh, this is a fact. And so I was trying to think, okay, why is this? And I do not believe in that natural sort of like, oh yeah, girls are biologically more scared than men. Um, and so I thought, okay, you of course you have your own unique experience and your own unique perspective, but this is not enough to explain such a general statement that seems to be true. And then people are like, in my kayak club at some point we had more girls than boys in the younger age group. And so we started being the club with all the girls in the valley. And then one time I remember hearing like, what's up with the girls from the Lapland kayak club? They're not scared. Like, how do you do this? And I started realizing that the girls in the younger age group, they were just going as hard, if not harder than the guys. Like 10 years old, they had their role. They would just like go in the biggest holes with no paddle and play. And I started thinking, okay, why is it like this in the club, and the other club next door, they're like crying, holding the rocks and not wanting to get out of the eddy. And I realized that there were two key factors. The main factor being the mom of some of these girls. They were sisters. The ones that were the craziest, they were all sisters. She just raised her three little girls the same way she raised her boys, so there was no gender difference between her four kids. And then the coach was not making any difference between girls and little boys. They're like, okay, go, your turn. When I remembered being a kid, if some of the boys were scared, it was very old school, and really things you could not accept now. They'd be like, don't be a pussy, come on, you little faggot. But if I was scared, if actually I think we were only two girls, or if the other girl was scared, it's like, it's okay, you'll do it next time. And so there was a difference between how the coach would address to little girls versus how they would address to little boys. And a lot of the time, it's like this in society and in your upbringing. And so, like a little girl that crashed, like, oh, you okay? And everyone's just like panicking. And sometimes the little boy is like, you'll be fine, and people just don't do the same. So it's things that you integrate as a kid. And then I started thinking through this primary, secondary socialization, and then I somehow founded a correlation between what seemed to be the female paddlers that would be more willing to go and less scared and more integrated within the field. So I kind of had to make a subjective um, position in the field from observation, because there were some girls that only started paddling a year ago, but they were going for it. And so what I found is the girls that seem to not have some irrational fear or less blockage or a healthier relationship towards risk, where they didn't have irrational fear that probably came from like socially constructed um you know pre-made ideas or behavior because of the habitus. uh I found a few common things where there was a strong male figure in their upbringing. uh Sometimes they started sport with their brothers or with their fathers. Sometimes it was they were the only girl in a group of friends as a kid in primary school. Sometimes they were a bit of a tomboy. Sometimes they're just like started dating a paddler later on. And so that was one of the thing, but not necessary. One of the other things were they were doing high performance sport as a kid, but it didn't have to be necessary kayaking. But in the people I interviewed, I had some of the girls that were going for it. They had done a bit of skiing. One had been a really good cheerleader. One had done rodeo. And it seemed that there was a correlation between the transfer they could do from the sport they did at a higher level when they started kayaking, and they could transfer skills. And then of course exposure to sexism and things like this. But mainly the upbringing and the trajectory, and how they perceive themselves, and they had more or less social representation of what there should be as a woman or not, was definitely like affecting directly how they behaved on the river, and and how they perceived fear and risks differently.
Okay, Nouria, when I first reached out to you and said, I want to invite you to come talk to the club, and I really want to spend a fair bit of time talking about your master's thesis, and your response was, oh, sociology and all these theories they'll have to understand that won't really be that interesting. I just want to say, I want to get my hands on your master's thesis on the write-up. In the
Can
US,
you read in French, because I'm not ready to dive back into it.
say in the US, when you write up your master's thesis, it gets like sent to the library at the college, and people can check your thesis out of the library. I am totally going to check your thesis out of the French library, and je parle un peu de français,
Okay,
not very much,
I can email that to you, but
because everything that
it
you
was definitely written last minute with a lot of mistakes, and I forgot to put half of the bibliography.
no, but you just gave context and structure and rationale to something that I think a lot of women voters know intuitively, but maybe didn't have the framework to talk about.
I think if you need a good framework, there is this New Zealand sociologist. She's called Holly Thorpe, and she's written a bunch of articles about women in snowboarding, and I think women in mountain biking, and I definitely used a lot of that to write my thesis, because it was really nicely done.
Okay.
So, and that's maybe not available because I had to email her.
Okay. Well, I'm seeing folks in the chat, and I'm not alone in wanting to get a copy and dive into it. And we're going to use Google Translate, it sounds like. We're going to get her translated. Maybe just we can help you get some English version articles out, perhaps. So, Nouria, I had huge plans for this talk. I was going to do this and this and this other thing, and then I was going to play your 2020 highlight reel. And we are already like 10 minutes from the hour. So I think that we should not play your 2020 highlight reel.
Yeah, I know of kayaking videos.
Oh no, but Nouria, so I want
No, I totally agree. I don't want to watch another kayaking video.
but I want to say to anybody on the line, watch this 2020, just Google Nouria Newman 2020 highlight reel. And I just want to say, Nouria, we have this little thing in my house where I'll be sitting in my office and I'll be going, oh God, oh God. And my husband will say, are you watching another Nouria Newman video? And I'm like,
Oh God.
so I always have that reaction where I'm just like, oh, why is she doing that? And then I have just like the hugest smile on my face every time you land something and you're like, you're like, your joy, your confidence, your skill, it just screams in all of your videos, and particularly the 2020 highlight reels. So we won't play it, but I absolutely want people to watch it. Teresa, will you help me out with questions from the audience? I want to make sure that people have a chance to get their questions asked and answered. And I might need to unmute you. Let's look. There you go.
Hi, sorry about that. I was wandering around looking for the link to the highlights video so I could post it.
Oh.
I do have a few questions that I collected while you were talking. There were some questions about the waterfall, the 100-foot waterfall in Ecuador. Where is it and what's it called?
So it's on the Pucuna River. It's not too far from the Hoyin. And it's near Wawasumaco, the village of Wawasumaco. And people were gonna start calling it the Pucuna waterfall, but then the Pucuna River is definitely another 90-footer on it. And so Galen said it was lame to call it the Pucuna waterfall. And I like Galen's opinion, so we're gonna call it Don Willow's waterfall, because the drop is on Don Willow's property, and it's the farmer who helped us to walk to the waterfall and find it, and they're super nice people.
Oh, that's great.
So it's
Yeah. So
Dunwiller
Don
Waterfall.
Wheeler's waterfall.
Yeah.
Okay. And then this question's from me, actually. I heard you say something about how when you landed from the 100-footer, it felt like your organs were squashed from your abdomen up into your thorax.
Yeah,
Is that
that
what you
was
said? Tell
that's
me
what I
more. I'm
said.
curious.
So a few years ago, or a few months, last year, maybe 2 years ago, I talked about waterfalls with a ski patrol friend, and is like, this is so messed up. You probably has the genetic things happening, and I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's also a firefighter, so they go on accident, and he explains to me in car crash, because of the shock, sometimes your insides are also bumping things and moving, and 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 it had never happened to me on a drop kayaking, but I think because the waterfall was definitely a little bit too low in terms of volume, to be the best aeration. Like, it would have been way nicer with more water, but because it was low, it was like a ramp, and there is a little bit of a kicker, and so uh, I got shot out from the water a little bit. Like, I disconnected, so I was fully in the air when I landed, and so I think I wasn't in the best possible boils, and because they were not that much boils, the impact was really hard, even if I was in a 90-degree, and it definitely felt like I it hit something, and when I rolled, I it felt so weird. I couldn't talk, um and then I was kind of panicked, because like when you can't breathe, it's almost the same feeling as when you can't talk, and when you can't breathe after a big impact, a lot of the time it's because you've broken something is wrong, which would be your back. So I just landed, rolled, and then I had this weird feeling, in chest and throat, and I didn't know what was happening. For it was only like a few seconds, uh, and then I realized, oh, I can breathe. And then I tried to talk, and it was a little bit hard, and then I was like, oh, okay, I can talk, but it's weird. And then the friend that I have for safety is like, hey, relax, and then started breathing, and I was like, okay, nothing is broken. Then I started talking, and I was like, actually, I'm really fine. And everything was good. It was just a big shock, and really weird feeling that makes you just stop and freak out a little bit. So it's good, because it won't be like one of those waterfalls where you like just drop and be like, yeah, scream, you know. um it was
Mhm.
definitely more like, what happened, okay, just checking, and I was all good, so that was nice.
So there were no injuries.
No injuries, but definitely got sick after it,
Hmm.
from so
Yeah.
still went to the hospital for the stuff.
All right. Well, here's another one, a slightly different angle. This is from a woman who started kayaking at the age of 57. And she made a few comments about her fear. And she said, what advice do you have for the mental head game?
I think there is no way to avoid being scared
Mhm.
kayaking, and you can start at 5 years old, or you can start at 57. It's just the same. You're gonna capsize, you're gonna swim, water is cold, and it's scary to be upside down, stuck in a kayak. There is no way around it when you start. And I think it's just a matter of like trying to rationalize your fear, and also making sure you just go step by step. Because if you rationalize and you're like, okay, I'm gonna try this ferry, and then you're really scared because maybe you're gonna flip. Most likely you're gonna flip because maybe you've never tried a ferry that was as hard before. But then you kind of have to discontract fear, and you'd be, okay, what if I flip? Is it shallow? No, okay, it's not shallow. Do I have a lot of people to help me with safety? Yes. There is no big rapid below. And then you just see that and you're like, okay, then I have no reason to be scared. Worst case, I swim. And then maybe I can try a few rolls before because I have time. And I think it's all about like trying to break it down and this deconstruct it, and not go do something that is over what you can do. And it's hard because you have to play, when you're trying to get better, you have to play with this limit of like, you have to push yourself, but you don't want to push yourself too hard into something where you're most likely gonna crash, and maybe if you're lucky you're gonna make it. It still has to be the good balance. It's like, most likely you're gonna make it, you should make it, you're confident that you know you can do this, but sometimes you're gonna crash because it's impossible to not crash, and it's impossible to not have bad lines, the same way it's not possible to be always good at your job or always cooking delicious food. Sometimes you just mess it up and it's burnt or whatever. And I feel like kayaking is the same, and sometimes the problem is people that don't show you when they mess up. And especially now where we live in this crazy messed up world with constant flow of information and everyone posting and putting things, and it seems like they never crash. And it's kind of depressing. You're like, oh, how can they be that good? And sometimes you just need to remember, all right, they're just never posting their crash because they want to look good, but they're actually not better than anyone else, and they just crash like anyone else.
Secret.
So
And
I think fear is good, and Galen has a good advice too. It's like, secretly we love being scared. It's like, it's like these kids, they're like hide and you scare them, and they're like, they're really scared, and then they start laughing. And there is part of fear that is healthy, and it's good, and it's the one that keeps you safe, and it's the one that keeps you want to like try new things. And I think it's important to embrace that sort of fear. And then the irrational fears, the one that like block you, these ones you need to deconstruct and like try to just put away. But it's always coming back, like it's always something that's moving in. And I feel like what's important is that some days you're able, like I see a lot of that in France, even more in the US. People really come to you and like, oh yeah, I'm a class 5 kayaker. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? I'm not a class 5 kayaker. Who's a class 5 kayaker? It means nothing. First, river qualification, it's horrible. Like there's some class 4 that are harder than some class 5 and more technical, and it's like, how can you compare a waterfall with a big volume river and a technical consequential class 3 looking rapid with some super easy inconsequential huge, you most likely gonna get a beat down at the end, but nothing bad will happen, class 5. It's just some things don't make sense. And then on top of this nonsense class scale, you have some days where you're capable of running class 4, and some days I'm not capable of running anything harder than class 3, because maybe I don't have the energy in me, or I don't feel good, or I'm just like tired. and and I think it's important to also like take into account that you need to try to know yourself, and sometimes you're ready to push it, and sometimes you're not even ready to do one of the rapids you've run 100 times before, and it's okay.
Nouria or Teresa, I'm going to jump in just with one reflection, one or two reflections, and then we can do more questions. But and I'm harking on the 2020 highlight reel. But Nouria, one of the things that I loved most about it, honestly, was you or your editors left in moments where you appeared scared. And there are, little moments throughout that highlight reel where you were human and you weren't perfect, especially at the end. That was terrifying. So I appreciated that so much. Point number one. And then point number two, just in thinking about the question and the 57-year-old woman, I hear you. I think I started kayaking when I was 45. And Nora, you said the thing about, you're in the kitchen and you burn something and whatever, you made a mistake. It's funny because when I'm in the kitchen and I burn something, I think exactly that. Oh, well, I burned the cookies. And I don't think women can't cook. But when I'm kayaking and I make a mistake, or I swim, or I miss the eddy, or I miss the boof, or I beach myself on the rock, whatever, I have this added burden, and I know this is true of other women in the background. And I'm not just thinking, oh, Deborah, you missed the move. I'm also like, oh, shit, they think women can't paddle. Oh, shit, I'm out here with all these guys. And I just missed the move, and that means women miss moves. And I
But
just,
the worst part of this is that maybe here and then you have some guys that are like, not super nice, and not but most of the guys that just don't care that you missed the move. And so what I find really hard when you look at kayaking in a male dominated sport where sexism is still a very present thing, I know most female paddler had one or two bad experience with some sexist guys that were assholes, but they're probably just the same way with some of the other guys, and have the exact same things. But one of the hardest thing is that some of the most sexist people in this industry are the women themselves. And I took the example of like wearing all pink and wearing the bikini, and it's so complex because you can be all pink and wear a bikini and be fully aware of it and what it means, and like gender constructed stereotypes, colors, and you're fully aware of it, and you use your femininity to emancipate yourself, and that's okay. A great example of that is Emily Jackson. All pink, all purple, but like she owns it. But the problem is when you have the exact same attitude with a lot of the time younger, not young, older girls, and they're not even aware of what's behind their behavior. And so, you can basically, you can be a woman and show your tits for two reasons. You're a free-spirited woman, and you can be like a feminist and really own your body and do whatever, or you can just show your tits to get more click on the internet, and then you're fully a victim of a system that has been built on patriarchy. I don't know how you say that, you pronounce that in English. And so it's always more complex because the same behavior can have different meanings But I think what's really frustrating for me is, when someone is sexist because they're an idiot and they don't know better, and maybe it's a guy and their father was sexist and it's not even their fault, they're just repeating things, or they think they're too cool. And I think, I really feel sorry for some of the boys in this industry. It must be so hard for them to always have to look strong and always have to look tough, and they get hurt and they have to be like warriors, and they're like, oh yeah, I got hurt, but look at me, I'm gonna put my nose back in place, I think is broken. Like, it must be really hard, you know and they're the same victims as sexism, if not more, as the women themselves. When you look at this, it's so hard for a little boy to start kayaking and be scared and have everyone being like, hey, don't be don't be such a fucking pussy, and you do it. And then, like, it's just things that are so deep and so rooted in society that it will take time to fix. The same way, if you were mentioning inclusion earlier, it's like you want more, you want kayaking or any outdoor sport to be more inclusive. Then how do you do that? First, you need to welcome everyone, but that's not going to be enough. Then you need to give people the mean to paddle, and so you'll have to break um, image barrier, like social representation of someone that's going to be like, oh yeah, this is, especially in the US, I mean, kayaking is a rich kid's sport. And so how do you get unprivileged kids and privileged people to start kayaking? You need to first make it accessible. And we have that in France with the club system. You pay membership, you get the boats given to you, the coaching is really good. It's based on socialism, public funding, which is a very different system from the US. But I feel like you guys, with how you're able to collect funds, you could reach similar systems and then set up similar systems. But then what's hard is, how do you break social representation, or like systemic racism that has been like constructed and deeply rooted for the last centuries. We're not even talking about decades, we're talking about centuries. And 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 I don't have the answers to that, the same way I don't have the answers to, like, how do you make female, you know um more equal, or not more equal, but like more mixity, at least within the sport, and same opportunities. And and I feel like for that you need to understand deeper mechanism that go with it. But it's a really hard stuff. And I I'm not, you're talking about all female clinic, and I'm not even sure about that. you
Right, right.
know I'm not sure that doing a kid camp just for Black people, or a kayak clinic just for women, is actually, solving the problem. In the short term, sure, you put people in boats, it's great. But then I'm thinking, what if the boys, they would be like, oh no, Nouria, you're not coming paddling with us today because it's an old boys day. I would be so sad. They would never do that to me, but at least not Ben and Boomer. But and I'm like,
Only woman in the world, they would never do that to.
I would be like, maybe, you know, um, maybe mixity is the key, and maybe the ultimate success is not to put Black unprivileged kids in boat, or give them a discount, because right now it makes your company look like they're making effort. But it's like, I think the biggest goal would be to mix kids with whatever background, whatever origin they have, and have them in the same paddling group and have them become friends and mix together. And I don't know how you achieve that, but I definitely coached one training session last year in a French club. We did a video project in the Verdon, and we had a day off of filming, and so we went and coached the kids session, and it was so cool. We had like couple black kids and 4 girls and some skinny ones and some chubby ones, and it didn't matter. It was just this big group of very different kids, and I was like, okay, this club is working super well. And I feel like we cannot solve all the problems in the world, but if you can solve, at your scale in a club, some of these things, you almost win already. And that's why when we did the camps in Iran, rather than doing all girls camp, we mixed the young girls with the young boys. We definitely had problems with some of the parents that were very conservative and very religious. So they forced us to do different classes and different groups for the swimming pool session, but then we still managed to mix the kids. And I think it was way more powerful for the little girls to realize I can do just like the boys. Even if you had to push them. You leave the boats on the floor, and the little boys, they were taking the boats and getting into it. And the little girls, put them in the kayak and explain, like kind of talk them through. But then once they realized that they could actually start doing more things in the kayak and do better, and you're just like cheering on them, then they realize they can do just like the boys, and then you do the small race at the end. And the little boys, they realize that the little girls, they can beat them as well. And I think that was way more powerful than just having only girls.
Yeah.
And some girls they want to do kayaking and yoga, great. But some guys, they want to do kayaking and yoga too, like Benny. And some other girls like me, they cannot touch their feet and they're not flexible. And I find yoga to be a little bit boring, and I don't want to do it unless I'm really hurt, and then I'm too late already. And I think it's important to go past
Yeah.
those gender or any sort of stereotypes for
You're doing a
any
good
matters.
you're doing a good job being a little commercial or an advertisement for some of the programming that the club has coming up next.
Oh
Brand,
yeah,
yeah,
that's because
yeah,
it was presented to me at the beginning.
Yoga for Paddlers is coming up, but also, the diversity, equity, and inclusion workshops that we're running. Probably going to have 5 different discussions over, 6 weeks, 6 or 8 weeks, and I'm guessing we're going to touch on a lot of the issues that you brought up today, because we are one of those clubs that absolutely wants to figure out how to do what we can and how to do it as right as possible, knowing that there is no true right answer. I'm super mindful of the time. I've done a terrible job being a moderator because I'm hanging on your every word. Teresa, why don't we, if there are 1 or 2 more questions, we could, depending on your availability, Nouria, do you have time for 1 or 2 more questions?
Yeah. I have 50 more minutes ish.
Well, we won't take
I can.
0. Let's take 10.
Well, here's one from Elizabeth, and I don't understand the question, but I'm hoping you will. She says, what did it feel like going through the land bridge on the Quijos?
Oh, that was quite special, because we still managed to do some sort of first descent, but it was a section that had been done, and they used to be the San Rafael waterfall. that was one of the major tourist attraction. And then there was some erosion due to the volcano activity, and maybe the dam didn't help, but I'm not following Ben's theory on this until I have a more scientific opinion on it. But the whole waterfall collapsed. And it was a disaster because when the waterfall collapsed, then all the sediments, everything, this whole canyon is just like fully disappearing. And a lot of people that have the farm have lost some of their lands. It's pretty bad. At the same time, they had pipelines that broke down, contaminated the water, and downstream of that, you have native people living mostly from the river water and from fishing. And so it was an environmental and social disaster. And when we were there, we just went to look at the arch because Ben, he studied geology and he loves that kind of thing. And then we thought it would be really cool to just go and look at it and see how it had changed, because Abe also went there many times, and every time he's been like flying the drone and taking photo and documenting the changes. And then when we flew the drone, we're like, okay, that whole section upstream is the whole gradient of the waterfall is now upstream of it, but it seemed manageable. The only problem is you're paddling through these giant landslides. So my main fear was we cannot stop and scout, because if we stop and scout, we exposed to some rock falls. So we ran the whole thing, and eventually the bigger rapid, I didn't feel like going blind, so we just scouted the entrance, and it was pretty big, whitewater and sharp rocks, and kind of just really really beautiful and really sad at the same time, because it it was a devastated river, and it felt like paddling in a bit of a graveyard. And then everything behind it, like the Ecuador has a huge loan to China, and there was huge corruption to build this dam, which is diverting 276 or 73 cubics of water, which is the equivalent of a low water Stikine. And the amount of water they're taking out of this river through the pipes to produce energy down below, it's crazy. But then there was an American companies prospecting to build the dam a few years before. I think they were Americans, and they're like, did a study, and they're like, no, it's too close to the volcano. There's gonna, like, they came to the conclusion it wouldn't work. And then the Chinese did it anyway. And what happened is that the dam, the river upstream, is bringing too much sediment, so the dam is not even fully functional. So to try to not lose too much of the potential that the dam could produce, they were doing these things where they open of the dam. The gates of the dam, they would just open it really fast, and then all the sedimented heavy water would just go all at once. And they would basically artificially create flash floods to empty the bottom of the dam from the sediment and not lose the capacity of the dam, or not as much. And the crazy thing is, this dam is not working. It's crap, and Ecuador has to pay a debt to China for the next 20 years for something that is not only not working, but maybe at the origin of like an ecological and social disaster as well. So it's very frustrating. And then you paddle through it, and it's beautiful because it was quite insane to go under this huge arc, and at the same time you're like, oh, there used to be a waterfall and now there is nothing because the whole arch collapsed. And it's
For
messed
those
up.
for those that want to see it, Nouria, you've got photos of it on your Instagram channel, on your
Yeah,
Instagram.
and there is an article written by the New York Times online that is really good.
Perfect. All these good questions are coming in now, so
I
it
know.
might be 5-0 actually. No, we'll see.
Well, tell me, should we continue with more?
I would. Yes.
It's okay.
Is it
You
okay?
want
I
to
mean,
pick-
I'm here. It's
How about the Nouria had a truly terrifying swim one?
Oh, yes. I think
I
many of
had
us
more
saw the
than
video.
once.
What's the question? Oh, could you please talk about how you calm yourself down and convince yourself to continue on for several days?
This is the you were on
Very easy. I had no other choice. If there was a way that I could just press the airdrop button and just end up on my mom's couch with a hug and a hot chocolate, I would have done that for sure. But it was not an option. And by the time I reached the rafting base, I only had 2 more days, and it was 3 days after the accident, and I was like, oh, might as well just finish it off. So
Cool.
That makes sense.
and
then
I could
there's-
buy a new toothbrush because I lost my toothbrush swimming, and that was horrible.
Oh no, was it in your life jacket?
Always.
That's great. Okay, here's another comment from Leanne. She says, great breakdown of objective and subjective considerations. Do you ever talk with your crew about a run afterward and review what went well and what could go better the next time, like a debrief?
When the crew is good, I feel like it's always very easy to talk about things. And I feel like with Ben, we do it a lot. Sometimes we even fight a little bit, you know, and sometimes we even make fun of each other, which is really funny. But I think that when you have a good relationship with your crew, it's easy. But I've also been in situations where I could not talk to the people that I disagreed with, and it created very unhealthy situation. So I feel like if anything, if you can talk things before it gets bad, it's always a good idea. But sometimes if you end up with people that you feel like they betray you, or they go against some of your fundamental values, in my case, was that they cared more about doing time lapse and shooting their video than the youngest kid of our group that had edema. He was getting altitude sickness, and for a few days, and we kept going up and down and back up, and then he was still feeling really sick, and he had a bump on the back of his head, and me and this other guy were just really scared that that it was edema and that it was getting really bad, and all these other guys, they're just scared about their photos and their videos. And after that, I just couldn't talk to them, where really it would have been way better if I just told them why I thought they were bad and what they could have done better. But sometimes it's just not that simple, and but if you can, it's always best, for sure.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, in that situation, simply going down the mountain would be all it was needed.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, we had to send him back to Lhasa, and they put him under oxygen, to make sure. but I think the least that people from your crew can do is check on you. Because if they cannot check on you when you have an oxygen pipe going through your nose, I don't know how they could be reliable on the river if anything happened. And then show a minimum of empathy. And I felt like, you know, the Tibetan drivers had more empathy for the kid than people that you're supposed to travel with. And two of them were dads. And we all know the past of that kid and why this trip was really important for him, which was related to the death of his dad. And I just, it was so against my values that I just couldn't talk to any of those guys. And then I was also mean and not having the best behaviors for sure. But you know, sometimes it happens, and it's just hard stuff.
Yeah.
I will just not go on trips with them anymore. They're blacklisted.
Well, Teresa, we might actually send Nouria on her way with this one last question that I see from Leanne. And Nouria, you are the exact opposite of blacklisted from the Lower Columbia Canoe Club.
Oh
We
yes, nice.
are so glad that you were able to join us. I've watched so many people in the chat just say how much they enjoyed hearing from you, what an honor it is. I know you don't want to think of yourself as anybody's hero, but you genuinely are. And so your fan base, your peanut gallery is curious. Last question for you. What's next? What's on your hit list? What haven't you done that excites you next? Now that you've crossed talk to the Lower Columbia Canoe Club off your list, I know that was a big goal of yours.
Well, I've got more meetings in Paris tomorrow. Very boring. Then other boring stuff. I'm trying to get healthy and feel good again.
That's right.
But I'm hoping to maybe go on a little road trip in the next 2 weeks and paddle in Corsica, because I've never been, and now it's kind of tricky to travel in outside of France, even in France. So we just thought maybe we keep it for, you know, safer, easier trips. And I'm not sure what I will do this spring. It will kind of just depend on the snowpack and how it melts. But I've been trying to spend more time in the mountains, mountaineering, because it's been really fun and it's been really helpful for a kayaking expedition as well. And I think the next step is also to be better off the water. I feel like having more climbing skills and being able to bolt fast or hand bolt fast and get better at rope work is gonna be the next thing to get better and you know, progress into expedition kayaking. Because I feel like on the whitewater side, we're close to a limit, and sometimes we can run some of those really hard rapids, but sometimes it would just be nice to be able to commit to those canyons and have a way out. So that's one of the big goals, is to definitely get better at mountaineering in order to get better at kayaking expedition, in order to also combine mountaineering kayaking expedition at some point. But I want to do it right, so I really don't want to do it in like commercial alpinism way. If I do anything, it won't necessarily be the highest or the hardest. I don't care about that, but I really want to do it on a beautiful mountain that has a beautiful river coming out of it, and do it in alpine style. So not leave trace, no oxygen. Do it right. But I'm not saying that other people do it wrong. I'm just saying that for me, that would be the way to do it right, because it's always more complicated and that there is no right or wrong. There is World Championships in June in Norway. So I might go and race that, try that new race boat, but not sure I can go fast anymore because I haven't raced in, in a few years now. And then hopefully do that expedition with Ben and Boomer in Ecuador. And I heard that the Italians have plans to go to Pakistan this fall, and I would really like to go paddle with the Italians in Pakistan. They're really good people, and I went with them in Norway. Very eclectic crew. I think Jordi, the youngest, is 21, and Giorgio will be 50.
Mm.
But if that crew comes together, I would stop everything I have planned to go with them, because I know it will be really good. Even if they cannot bring all their Italian food to Pakistan, which they usually do for other destination, and then you're just filling in a 5-star restaurant and they never let you cook. So it's really good. Traveling with the Italian boys it's a good plan.
I love it. Nouria, you ended us on the perfect note, because I think so many people on the line today, they did exactly that. They stopped everything, made sure to be able to join us today in the middle of a weekday to hear from Nouria Newman, who is perhaps the planet's best kayaker, but also the most humble, it would seem. We so appreciate your taking time to talk to us today. We wish that there are many alpine mountains and many rivers in your future. We know you're going to do it right.
As long as we don't dam them all.
We will. Oh, my word. Let's just
So
take all those dams out while we still know better. All right, Nouria. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
thank you. I'm gonna go to bed. Yes. Thanks for having me. And have a great day or a great lunch or whatever you guys are doing. And hopefully the next takeout discussion will be, not for a computer. I have never been so excited to hang out on crappy parking lots with a bunch of people. Like, since it's no longer a thing, I will never be complaining about, like, oh, we're wasting too much time on this parking lot. The lower white salmon one, you're always like, oh, come on, let's go. No, I'm just gonna embrace it.
We will linger like we did on tonight's call or today's discussion, for sure. Here's
All
hoping.
right.
Please. Goodbye, Nouria. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.